Welcome to the Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a show that is a central hub and safe space for authors to share their stories. The Bold Book with Dr. Denise begins now.
Hello, welcome again to the Bold Book of the Day. This podcast is for anyone looking for inspiration, and I have an inspiring author for you to talk with or listen to today. Today's guest is someone who has shaped some of the greatest storytelling minds in Hollywood and beyond. So you can call him professor if you want, but I call him Mr. Richard Walter. He's a best-selling author, celebrated screenwriter, and a longtime professor who chaired the graduate screenwriting program at UCLA for decades. Please welcome Richard Walter.
Thank you. Thank you.
Richard, please tell us about your book, Deadpan, and what gave you this idea to write this fiction?
Well, if I were still a professor, I am retired from the university after more than 40 years. But if I were not, if I was still there, I would say it's really an homage to Kafka, to Franz Kafka. But since I'm now retired and I'm not a professor and I don't have to talk so fancy, I'll say I stole it from Kafka. There's a legendary story by Franz Kafka called The Metamorphosis, in which a man wakes up one morning to discover that he's an insect or a bug or a cockroach or a beetle, depending on the translation. It was written early in the last century in German. Kafka's German. And I wondered, it made me think, what else could somebody wake up as? A fern? That doesn't sound too exciting. A rhinoceros? A little better than a fern. But instead, I decided that it should be the world's most successful, best known, most popular, best loved stand-up comedian. And since so many comedians are Jews, I decided to make the character who is changed into the comedian something of a vaguely anti-Semitic person who suddenly finds himself in the life of a Jew, and not just any Jew, but the world's most popular comedian. And when he tells the audience, they welcome. He has another name. His name is Dwight Bridges, but they're calling him Richie Richie. Ritchie is the last name. There's no T in the first name. And when he walks forward to this Vegas, a jam-packed Las Vegas main room, they're all cheering and they just love him to death. And when they finally settle down, he tries to explain who he is, that he doesn't really know what's going on here. That his actual name is Dwight Bridges, and he's a Buick dealer from Hogswallow Hollow, West Virginia. And as he's saying this, they're saying it with him. And apparently he's been transformed into a comedian whose signature routine is to claim that he's the person who he really believes he is. And he wants to by the way, this is set in 1973 for the most part, which is the time of the Yom Kippur War, a war in the Middle East. Sound familiar? And there were disruptions in the world oil supplies and gas lines in the United States. We had to wait in line at gas stations to get our gas. And as a result of that, there was some anti-Semitism that flared. It wasn't arson and burning and arson and murder and looting and stuff like that. It was desecration of synagogues. I remember reading in the paper that there were oil tanks along the roadside somewhere in Oklahoma that were spray painted with graffiti that said things like "Burn Jews, not oil." dumped Kissinger. Henry Kissinger was the Jewish Secretary of State at that time under President Nixon, and that kind of like got me interested in this subject that has become now red hot. He has a band. He's an amateur musician, and he plays with some local guys. His dealership is failing because nobody's buying gas guzzling Buicks. What with the gas crisis, and therefore he's sort of quietly blaming the Jews. And the band rehearsal that he goes to this particular night, his friends, they don't tell him, but they're leading him off on some mission that they don't tell him about, and they end up desecrating a synagogue. They don't burn it to the ground, they don't hurt anybody, but they do spray paint it with some epithets. And the rabbi of the synagogue tells the police officer who comes, leave it alone. This is, we've been through much worse than this. And if you make a big deal out about this, it's just going to inspire, it's going to encourage further outbreaks. So just leave it alone, which is quite different from what you'd expect the rabbi to say. You'd think that he'd say, hey, you got to check this down and do something about it. And it's, we talk about bigotry, about prejudice, about stereotypes, racial and religious and other kinds of stereotypes. And people like me, advantaged, privileged, rather well-to-do, cultured, literate, they're highly educated people. We think we're above all of that we don't have our stereotypes. And I believe we do have such stereotypes, and one of them is the rural Southern sheriff, law enforcement officer. He's a redneck bigot and a criminal and so on. I thought it'd be interesting to have a justice-seeking policeman, which would be just different from what you might expect here. So it's a reversal. The officer thinks it's an important thing to track down this and get acknowledgement for what happened and consequences for the people who perpetrated this. In the meantime, and the rabbi is saying no, leave it alone. So that's quite a reverse that I think is kind of intriguing. The comedian, he wants to get back. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. He wants to get back to his familiar territory back home, and he's constantly trying to work that out at the same time as the policeman is trying to track him down. And the more that he's that the comedian is in his new life, the more he kind of likes that. He was a starving, failing Buick dealer, and here he is suddenly a superstar. It's unfamiliar, it's frightening, it's scary, but they're throwing money at him, they're throwing women at him. He starts to like that and decide that maybe he want to take on this character, maybe just surrender to it. But the more he does that, the more the officer from West Virginia is tracking him down. And when he finally does get caught and brought to trial, his friends who committed this thing, this desecration, they blame him, even though he didn't really know about it. He went along with it, but he didn't even know about it until they did it. He certainly didn't plan it. He didn't inspire it. And they all lie. They perjured themselves, saying that he did that. And when it's his turn to testify in court, surprisingly, he says, yes, it's true what they said, even though the reader knows it's not true. It was all my fault. I dragged them into it. And so in a way, he has become a Jew. Which Jew? The most powerful Jew that ever lived, Jesus Christ, who Christians tell us took upon himself everybody else's sins and saved them thereby. So it's a it's an interesting mixture of stuff going on. It ends at the next gas crisis. It almost all takes place in 1973. But in 1979, at the very end, he leaves Hogswalla Hollow, West Virginia, and he ends up in somewhere in New Mexico. And he's got a chain of laundromats. And suddenly there's another oil crisis. This was the Iranian Revolution. The Shah of Iran, who's a character in the book, was ousted, and the Ayatollahs were installed, and there were again gas. There was disruption of oil supplies, and there were lines at gas stations all around the world, including in the United States. And our guy finds himself suddenly he's blaming the Mexicans and the Native Americans for hurting his business at his laundromats, and he rages against them, and suddenly finds himself in the back of the back room, the dressing room, the green room at a Latino club. He's suddenly been turned into a norteño star. Norteño is a special breed of Mexican popular music. And I think what I'm trying to say there is that the problem in the world isn't lunatics and crazy maniacs, like, for example, Hitler, but there's always people like that around. The real danger is the tens of millions, the scores of millions of educated, sophisticated, intelligent, literate people, moral, principled people who go along with all of that. And what I'm trying to say is that each of us has a kind of a bigotry, a kind of a tribalism that we're maybe not aware of. And I think that we should be aware of that and struggle with it every day. I don't think we're ever going to do away with fear and bigotry. It's part of the human condition. Human history goes back 300,000 years. And the biggest, aside from like starvation and disease, the biggest threat that humans face is being killed by members of another group of humans. There are only 2 species in all of the nature that do this. There are 500 species of animals, but only 2, human beings and chimpanzees. Humans and chimpanzees, we share 98% of the same DNA, and we're the only animals, we're the only species who form groups within the species and murder members of the same species who belong to some other tribe or family or nation, you name it. And we're constantly afraid of that. We want to make sure we're on the right team, and we have these markers for what tells us that we are what we are. And I think we need to examine those if we're ever to achieve what we want, which is not an unrealistic, idealized, prejudice-free community, but a safe one where people realize and place emphasis upon not what separates us and makes us different from these other people, but about this other family, this other tribe we belong to, which is the human family that everybody belongs to. We all come from the same place. Scientists, anthropologists, they tell us that humankind arose, the species Homo sapiens arose at a particular time and place. And that time, as I said, is 300,000 years ago. And the place is the Great Rift Valley of West Africa. Everybody on the planet is African if you go back far enough in terms of the stuff that we're made of. The Navajos as an example, say that they grew up here, they originated here in the American Southwest, and I respect that and I believe that. If they're talking about what I think they're talking about, which is their identity, their culture, their practice religiously, and every other way, yes, absolutely, it evolved spontaneously out of the where it is in again the Navajo country in the Southwest. But even they, if you're talking about the actual cells, the stuff we're made out of, goes back to the same place, if you go back far enough, where you and I and everybody else on this planet, derives from. It seems to me what this tells us that everybody, for example, in the United States, immigration is a big issue now. Everybody here in the country is either an immigrant, like my mother was, or like all of my grandparents were, and most of the grandparents and most everybody I happen to know. They are the descendant of immigrants, and once again, I think somebody who's struggled to get here, like my mother did, is a better American than somebody like I, who merely happened to fall out of her because she happened to be here. So I'm trying to tell a good story. That's the main thing that I'm trying to do. But if there's any lesson in it, it's that we've got to stop focusing upon our differences and rejoice and celebrate in what it is that we all share.
Oh, thank you so much. Man, you have said so many things that make this conversation so current, because even though it was set in 1973, yet so many of the topics that were hot topics then are even more hot topics now.
Yeah.
Because things, even though things change, things stay the same.
Yeah.
And one of the things you mentioned was anti-Semitism of the time, and how, it was very strong because of the war. And now we are living in the same atmosphere, because the same war is, it's different, but it's the same. The same war is something that is at hand and we have to deal with.
Yes.
You also, and I'd like to touch on that, in that things are the same but different. It's a different kind of time. It's a different life. And anti-Semitism, as well as Islamophobia, is at really high, is really high and heightened in this time, because I live in New York, and I hear both ends. I don't see it because I don't go anywhere. I live very close to, I'm a doctor of nursing practice and a hospitalist, and I work at a hospital, and then I do this. So I don't venture around too many people at this time. So I'm not going to say that I see it, but I hear people complaints, and I am not far from the current events. I am, it's on my phone. I am on social media. So I see it on social media. How can we embrace and understand the story so that we get a beautiful picture of what is really going on both sides, and do see how we can contribute to helping both people feel seen, because that's the most important thing, that people feel seen and heard, and that their plight, no matter how you feel about it, is understood, and we can come to we can give voice to both parties.
Well, as you say, both parties, as if there's just two parties, but of course there's the multiplicity of parties we want to give validity.
I know.
No, we do generally these days tend to think that things break down A or B. I think it's part of the the digital era. No matter how sophisticated it is, what you're looking at, it all comes down to zeros and ones. There are, it's like there's an unthinkable, unspeakable number, vast, huge number of switches, but each switch only has two positions, on or off, and that's why I think we're getting this kind of narrowness of views. It's more complex than that. It's more complicated than that. It's more interesting than that. Again, we're trying to reassure ourselves that we're protected because we belong to whatever family it is that we belong to. And I think that's why one thing that's important to do is to expose yourself to other people. When I came to UCLA, the screenwriting program, and it's a very competitive program. It's easier to get into the Harvard Medical School than into the UCLA screenwriting
Really?
program.
Wow.
In terms of how many qualified applications there are and how many slots we have, yes. And sometimes I talk about a guy who went to Harvard because he couldn't get into the fiction program, somewhere. He wanted to be a writer, but his fallback position was to go to Harvard Medical School. I'm proud to brag that when I got to UCLA, the screenwriting program was really a white boys club. There were almost no people of color and virtually no women. 50 years ago, I actually wrote a movie that was directed by a woman. I'm told it was run in the Bologna, Italy Film Festival recently. At that time, Stephanie Rothman. The movie was called Group Marriage. Was one of the 3 women that year who directed movies. Without Floyd George, without any, like 25, 35 years ago, I succeeded, along with the help of my colleagues, in diversifying the program. And the reason that I wanted to do that was, second of all, I'll come to first of all in a moment, but second of all, I think it's principled and moral. People ought to have an equal opportunity. I really believe in that. But first of all, it's more interesting. It's just, you're in New York. I grew up in New York. I went to Stuyvesant High School. I schlepped in on what we call the BMT to Stuyvesant. In fact, last night I had dinner with pals of mine from Queens, just last night, who were out here. And one thing I loved about New York was that it was diverse. I spoke to a colleague recently who had been in a town he'd done research for over a year in a town in Switzerland, I believe. And I said, so how was it? He said, well, it was great, but everybody's a blonde-haired white guy. There's no variety there. The very famous musician, Pablo Casals, the cellist, who was the master of cello in the last century, was asked, what's your favorite thing about music? And he said, variety. It's fast, it's slow, it's staccato, it's legato, it's solo, it's ensemble, and that's the beauty of humankind. God's family comes in all colors and all shapes and all accents. That's not some mistake that God made, but testimony to her greater glory. It seems to me. So first of all, I made the program diverse just because it's more interesting. It's less boring. And the one rule we have at UCLA, you can do anything you want, but there's just one rule, and it's 3 words long, and here it is: don't be boring. And it's really boring when everybody looks the same, sounds the same, talks the same. It really squanders the possibilities of the rich human life.
Well, so thank you for explaining in such intricate details why it is that we have these biases and how we can change our environment by just looking at other people and embracing the differences. You know, you exemplified that and told a really great story, about how we can do that. And I think one of the things that I got from listening was that uh, we do think that the more educated we are, the more above things we are, meaning that we think we understand things a little bit more than others. And if they were smarter, if they were brighter, if they were more well read, if they had more experiences, if they had more degrees and pedigrees, then they would understand the intricacies and the difficulties and the complexities of what's going on. But having been at both spectrums myself, where I was not educated about certain things and now feeling educated about certain things, I do believe that when I had no education or very little education about humanity and about immigration and about culture and about tribalism, before I had any education on these things, I also believe that it went over my head. As a matter of fact, I had no belief because it went over my head. It's like the red car syndrome. I started to learn more about it. And because I'm learning more about tribe and culture and all of these things that open up your mind and stretch you to beyond what you've ever imagined, because I have been well read now and I have a book podcast and I meet so many great authors that are sharing stories, and they're telling stories about different places and different cultures and different tribes. I am beginning to understand that things are not as complex as we want people to feel they are. I believe that things are not as complex because we're all human and we have that one innate thing, and that is to feel like we belong. And that is why, like the chimpanzees, we separate because we want to feel like we belong. So instead of embracing a global community, we want to separate and feel like we belong to a more privileged society or we are better than them because we are Jamaicans. We are better than them because we are Black. We are better than them because we're more educated. We are better than them because we wear red lipstick and they don't. So we always are looking for something to separate us so that we can feel better than others. And the minute we start to chip away at trying to feel like we are better than people, then the more united than we can be. The more we realize that your mother bleeds as well as my mother, and we are all yearning for the same thing. And that is for the health of our human race, the health of our children, the health of our grandparents, and the health of just being in a world that can give us the opportunity to live our days in a joyful, peaceful, comfortable ways. And so that is also why I am crushed that even 50 years later, in 1973, you wrote this story, and even 50 years later, things are still the same, where, someone can feel threatened because of where they were born or because of their religion, because of people feeling that we are better than the next person. So I do feel that there is a responsibility for us, especially because we have voices. And even though it's still limited, because we may think that in this time free speech is well, I would say in an era where free speech and cancel culture, they dominate public debate. How do you navigate, how do you navigate this season knowing that free speech is not so free anymore?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I like to tell people that nobody needs to protect your right to say "Have a nice day." Nobody has to protect your right to engage in civil, rational, logical, intellectual, intelligent, informed, expansive debate. It's the stupid stuff. It's the jerky stuff that needs to be protected, and otherwise you have to set up some kind of a board that decides what's jerky and what's stupid, and different people have different views of that. You don't need me to agree with you, but I do completely. I've spent most of my life on a college campus, and you can see the embodiment of exactly what you're talking about in the safe spaces movement. People at UCLA, where I was located, from time to time they would want to set up a safe space, for example, for LGBTQ plus people, a place on campus where they could go and feel absolutely safe, not experience danger and fear and so on. And I would say to them, please tell me, what place on campus do you think it's okay for LGBTQ plus people to be intimidated and attacked and made fearful? Shouldn't the whole campus be that way? From time to time, I would be approached by agents and even producers looking for new writers. And occasionally somebody would say, we have a script and we think that a woman would be uniquely well suited to write this script. And so we're looking for a woman writer. And I would ask them, please tell me, what kind of script do you think a woman writer would not be suitable to write? I read in the paper the other day that a man can't write a narrative, a story with a female protagonist, and have it be any good because he hasn't had the lived experience of womanhood. Well, did you ever hear of Hedda Gabler? Did you ever hear of Anna Karenina? Did you ever hear of Madame Flaubert, of Madame Bovary by Flaubert? There's just two kinds of art: good art and bad art. Good art is art that attracts you, that engages you, and bad art is boring. And there's nothing harmful about it. But it just will never. The failure to engage like gears in a narrative comes from those kinds of that kind of bigotry, those kinds of prejudice. The word prejudice, it's pre. Judging. So pre is before, and judging what? Well, you're judging a person before you know that person. You're judging that person based on the membership she has or he has or they have in a particular group. So at the very most fundamental level, it's ignorance that is our enemy, because if you're informed about that stuff, then you don't go that way.
I gotta agree with you 100%, because that is the premise of my argument. Like, yes, you need to read, research, learn, and it doesn't need to be formal education, people, because there are so many different ways to learn nowadays that ignorance is not acceptable. It's not acceptable anymore, because you can find out anything, you can learn anything. But that's us. We believe in education. So Before, as someone who has taught thousands and thousands of screenwriters, how does your process differ when you're writing a novel versus writing a screenplay?
Well, a novel is easier. It's, for
Mm-hmm.
one thing, it's longer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Hemingway once wrote a letter to his Max Perkins, his legendary editor in New York. Um, long letter commenting on this and that, 9 pages. And at the end, he says, "Well, please forgive me, Max, for writing such a long letter. I didn't have the time to write a short one." Um, in a screenplay, if you have a waterfall, you want to describe a waterfall, here's the description: waterfall. If you go on and talk about the way the light, as you might in a novel, the light forms prismatic colors off of the spray, and the water weeps down across the craggy granite rock face and so on. You're communicating to the reader that there's a lot of stuff here I don't have to pay attention to. I
Uh-huh.
just want to know what happened, who's there, what do they do, what do they say. Um, so the trick is what I call integration, and I'm not talking about black and whites together. We shall not be moved. The old civil rights movement, and that kind of integration. What I mean is simply this: a screenplay. We're talking now specifically about a screenplay. Is really just two kinds of information: what we see and what we hear. And the what we hear, there's a lot of noise, a lot of sound, and a lot of soundtracks in a movie. But from the point of view of the writer, it's mainly the dialogue. And you will succeed if every line of dialogue and every sight and every sound achieve the purpose of the art. The purpose of narrative art is to tell a story. So everything that happens, everything that's seen, all of the actions and everything that's heard, all of the language that the actors speak will work if it palpably, measurably, identifiably, discreetly, particularly, it moves the story forward. That's all there is to it. It's so easy to understand. So people say, "Richie, why doesn't everybody do that?" Well, I said it's easy to understand, uh, but to do it's the hardest thing in the world. If you don't think it's the hardest thing in the world, I ask people sometimes, I want you to sit in a room, not for 7 days, but for 5 days, not for 8 hours, but just for 3 hours. And what I want you to do is just try, sincerely try to think something up out of your head that you can write down and that people will not only pay attention to it for 2 hours, or if it's a movie or even a short novel. Deadpan is about 250 pages. I'm a slow reader. It would take me 15 or 20 hours to read that. Maybe you could get through it in 10 or 12 hours. We're asking people, when I wrote that book, I'm asking people to not only to pay attention to what I wrote for 20, 30 hours, but to pay money for the privilege of doing that. I promise you, 9 out of 10 people, or more than that, will run for their lives and beg for a job where they have to deliver mail or wash cars or something like that. It's profoundly difficult to do. The other, so again, integrated. There can't be anything there for its own sake. It must be there. It must be like dialogue, for example. It must be worth listening to just because it pops and sizzles and crackles. But that's not enough. If that's all it does, no, it also has to move the story forward and in a way that you can identify. And that's why they pay us so much when they pay us at all, because it really is a difficult thing to do.
Do you have any hope for storytelling for the future?
I do. I'm somebody who's not afraid of artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't think you can stop it. Um, it's like I hear people. Uh, some people the other day I heard talking about self-driving cars that in a number of years, 10 years from now, maybe even less than that, there just won't be people driving cars and driving trucks. And won't that put out of work cab drivers and Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and the truck drivers and so on? Well, when the internal combustion, it's funny. I was talking to somebody yesterday who's a member of the Teamsters Union. Now, you know why it's called the Teamsters Union? It's because it was formed before there were automobiles, before there were internal combustion engines, and the teams of horses were what the Teamsters, what they drove. When the motor car and motor truck came along, the internal combustion engine, the diesel engine, it put out of work blacksmiths who did horse, shoes, and the manufacturers of buggy whips, that were used and so on. Should we have stopped that? Of course not. Could we have stopped that? Also, I don't think so. I hear, for example, complaints that there's a school which 2 years ago instituted a whole new writing program. And it was a high school, and the around that time, since that time, the writing of the students got much, much better, the essays that they wrote. But then they discovered recently, just a few months ago, that the kids are using AI. Well, what's wrong with that?
Exactly.
When I was a college professor, I had to write all kinds of documents from time to time. I taught writing, but it was creative writing. I had to do a lot of writing that wasn't creative. For example, I might have to write a report reviewing the record of a colleague of mine who's being considered for promotion. Mm-hmm. I might have to write a report for the regents about what my program is up to. I don't see why a first draft can't be written by AI. Nobody complains because spell check, changes something that's a mistake. Why shouldn't it get really sophisticated like that? I know what's new, what's changing is always clunky and awkward, and the unknown is always fearful. But there isn't any stopping it. This is evolution. This is change. There's a book called The Crooked Cucumber. It's about a particular Zen master, a Zen Buddhist master, about Eastern wisdom and Zen. And somebody said to him, I can't figure this out. I just don't get it. Can't you get? I don't get enlightenment. I just don't know what that is. I'm doing all the exercises. I'm reading what I'm supposed to read, and I just don't understand what enlightenment is. Can you get it down to just 2 words? And the Zen master says, everything changes. I like that. You got to get out of your own way and not only allow these changes, but to some extent you need to welcome them, celebrate them, rejoice in them, learn how to exploit them. And exploit in this context I don't mean as a pejorative, a dirty word. It just means to make the most of. That's what I think people need to do, rather than suppress. Just like with free speech, do you want to? Do you think the answer to anti-Semitic sentiment is to suppress that speech? I think it's actually good when people are alerted and disturbed and upset by stuff like that. I think that's a call to arms and to awareness and to an affirmative and enlightened way to confront these issues and to recognize that they always go on. They're never going to be swept away. We'll always have to deal with them. So instead of trying to sweep them away, let's learn how to deal with them.
Whew. I wish we could say,
I have to say the way to deal with them is to expose yourself to people who are different from you.
Absolutely. I agree. And I just wish we had more time to talk, because you seem like such an interesting person, and I would
Thank
love
you.
to have this conversation go on and on and on, because I don't think I'm going to limit my conversations to an hour anymore, because for example, we could continue to talk about, you know, your book, because Deadpan uses humor to confront hate and prejudice and identity. And so we could talk about each of those issues separately. But I wanted to ask you, why do you believe satire and laughter are such powerful tools against intolerance? And I wanted to ask you that, and I want you to go ahead and give me that answer. But then I have some other questions for you, and I just wish we could stay here forever.
Okay. Well, I'm remembering there was 50 years ago, there was the notorious bigot Lester Maddox from South Carolina, or one of the Carolinas, I think, on a talk show. I think it was the Dick Cavett show, and with him was Truman Capote. This is a guy who had the Pickwick. He had a segregated restaurant, and he handed out as segregation as Jim Crow was ending. They were no longer allowed to do that. And he was handing out pickaxe handles um, to customers, as if to beat back the people that were not welcome there. And when he made a crazy statement about it, and Truman Capote, the writer, um, uh, he just laughed. He just when there was nothing to do other than just laugh. It was so absurd. You know, and you're talking to people who are irrational. You can't reason with them. Life is really there's two things that drive our human experience. One is emotions and feelings, and the other is intellect, logic. You know, the heart and the belly and the groin versus the head and the brain. And we tend to think, like we said before about digital media, it just breaks down 50-50. But the truth is, emotion is much more powerful than logic, than rational debate. And we've got to be aware of that our feelings can't dominate everything that we do. And I think that's why we have fiction, why we have literature and movies and plays. It's a safe place, the movie theater or the book that you're reading, to experience the in a simulated circumstance, a circumstance that somebody made up, feelings that are not made up, that are real. And then when we encounter such feelings, and these are dark feelings, rage, grief, fear, you name it. Uh, Nobody is going to go through life and escape frustration and disappointment and heartache. I don't care how successful you are. I know some of the richest, most successful people that ever breathed, and not one of them got away without ever having, you know, disappointment and frustration and anger. We can deal better with it if we've dealt with it before in a simulated circumstance. We got through it. Maybe we'll get through it this time too. So it's a way to practice. I really think it's biological. It's evolutionary. We need it as badly as we need. If we don't get our culture, our art, our creativity, our spirits, our souls will become distended and misshapen and warped in the same way that our bodies do. If you have a famine and people aren't getting the proper nourishment. So I'd appeal to people to reach out. Don't play it safe, especially in art. The most dangerous thing you can do is to try to play it safe. You know, you go along with the trends, what's happening. One of those trends were in the works 2-3 years ago. It's too late because it's the trend. And doesn't every artist have something that she or he or they are dying to write about, you know? I don't know any worthy writer who wonders, what should I write about? They have a story they just feel compelled to tell, and they should go with that.
I love your twist on, things, and bringing humanity into everything. Thank you for being real. I believe that's why you were called to write Deadpan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, um, I also want to sum it up because I've had the wonderful opportunity of listening to you and thinking about all of the people's lives that you have touched and all of the issues that you've touched upon, and you've touched upon the civil rights movement, and you've touched upon injustice and anti-Semitism and so many things. And because we are living in a time where this thing is at the forefront of our doors again, and will continue to as long as we as long as we don't address the rights of justice and dialogue, the importance of dialogue. The United States Civil Rights Movement proved that systemic injustice can be challenged, not through domination, but through courage, for people standing up for what they believe in, and for people standing up for being recognized. And it was done through dialogue and moral clarity. And so at its core, it was about recognizing that as human beings, we have a shared humanity for all people, whether you were Black or white or whatever. And so I wanted to say, because I am thinking about the war that is going on right now, between the Palestinian and and Israel. So I am thinking about that because, likewise, the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict reminds me and reminds the world that peace and progress can only come when justice and mutual recognition come first. Real change. We will have the same things going on years and years and years later. You are talking about something that happened in 1973, and this is 2025. And I believe that real change will not come from erasing another or one person or another one people, but from creating a shared vision where both people, both communities can live freely and securely and equally, or have equal opportunities. I believe I'm saying a lot. And so if the lesson of civil rights era teaches anything, it is that reconciliation is possible when empathy
Yes.
outweighs fear, and when societies commit to equality, not as an idea, but as a practice.
Yes. I'm no kind of political activist, but I was involved in the civil rights movement. I was actually there in 1963 on August 28th. I have a dream that I actually heard it. And I can imagine people saying, "Oh, here's another enlightened white guy who, is stooping to help his Black sisters and brothers." But when I was picketing Woolworths and Herald Square in sympathy with the freedom riders down south who were having the buses burned, and as they were trying to integrate lunch counters and so on, for me, doing that I was not doing that as a favor to my Black friends. I was doing that for selfish reasons, because I think that prejudice and bigotry against one group exposes Jews and Catholics and you name it, the Latinos, Southern Asians, Northern Asians. It's not just one particular group's struggle. It's a struggle for the community,
Yes.
and I mean the human community, the world community.
The world.
And
Yes.
so I would encourage people: don't be generous, be selfish in that way, and realize what you share and what is your interest here in furthering this cause.
Thank you so much. I can't wait for you to come back. I enjoyed our
Love to
conversation
come back.
so deeply. Before you go, please share where the listeners can find your book.
Well, it's widely available. Even you might even find it in a bookstore if you can find a bookstore. But of course, Amazon has it. It's from, and so do the Barnes and Nobles. All of the online if you just punch in, or you can go to richardwalter.com and it'll take you to a site. You go to Heresy Press, the publisher. It's now been acquired by, it's a new publisher, but it's been acquired and become an imprint of Skyhorse Publishing, a big New York house. And you can get it directly from them there. But if you go to Amazon and punch in my name or the name of the book, Deadpan, it'll come up. And I promise, if you read it, you'll get a giggle out of it. Even though it writes about, it tells a story of about a very unfunny subject. It's a very funny book.
Yes. Guys, please go out and get Deadpan and you'll be dying laughing. Before you go, there are 3 questions that I love to ask each of my guests, and so you're not going to get away. What is a bold statement that you can make to the audience?
Stop being comfortable. Welcome distress and worry. It just tells you that you're alive. Quit wanting everything to be smooth. You know, I was a teacher, as we've mentioned, for 40 years, and nowadays everybody's supposed to be comfortable in a classroom. I thought it was my duty to make people uncomfortable, to provoke them, to disturb them, to upset them. I even embraced opinions that I don't sincerely hold, just to goad them into thinking for themselves. It's not your job to just transmit data, but to get people to think for themselves and to become critical thinkers. And likewise, I'm teaching screenwriting. The last thing you want in an audience in a movie theater is for them to feel comfortable. If you walk past the movie theater and suddenly the door is open and everybody's streaming out because the movie obviously just ended, and everybody's just sobbing, weeping, and trembling, you might say to yourself, wow, that must be some sorry, sad movie. I don't want to see that movie. No, you would immediately want to get in to see that movie, because remember, the movie is fake. There's nothing more fake than a movie, but the emotions that you feel are real. When you are scared in a movie, you are scared.
Yes, a very good one. Thank you. The next one is, what is a bold promise that you can make to the audience?
I promise that artificial intelligence will not destroy the world.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, if I could get even crazier, it may actually, if it takes over all of society, it may be a better society. You know what's going on right now in the Middle East? It's not a sudden outbreak of anything. What suddenly breaks out is a few years of peace. But this has been going on from the beginning of time, before recorded history. So stop. Maybe we'd be better off with artificial intelligence, because it has great intellect, but it doesn't have emotion. Maybe it's emotions that's destroying us, bringing us down. I just don't know. That's the one answer you're never allowed to give at a university. I don't know. But I also know that you just have to sort of find out, and the way you find out is by sort of getting into the stream of things and seeing what happens.
I like that we should embrace the future. And I believe that concerning AI, the future will forever forge on. So either you get on or you get left behind.
Yes, I quite agree.
The third question is, you have done so much. You've already, moved from, in the book, you move from one place to the other. And I'm considering or wondering if this is because you've had such a well-traveled life yourself, talking about stories from West Virginia to Tehran. Is it that you are well-traveled yourself, and what bold move do you have planned for the future?
Well, I traveled everywhere over my life. I gave master classes in Madrid and London and Paris and Rome, Shanghai and Beijing. My book, my screenwriting book, my last screenwriting book from 15 years ago is actually in its Mandarin translation is a big success there, and now I've just closed a contract for with a Russian publisher, and I think we have to realize that this is and I left out all kind, Rio de Janeiro and Sydney, Australia, and all over the United States. It really is one world, and we have to recognize. Our only hope is to remember is to recognize and not just reluctantly accept, but embrace and rejoice in the fact that we are one big family. I do have I despair, not for myself because I'm an old guy, but I worry about my children and my grandchildren. But I do have hope that the things will work out all right. This is the first in all of history. This is the first time, even though there's terrible oppression and distress and cruelty all around the world, billions of people are experiencing that. But that was always the case. What is not the case is that there are also now billions of people, not enough, but increasing numbers. This was never true, except after 300,000 years of history. This has only become true in the last couple hundred years, where there are billions of people who are well-fed, well-clothed, well sheltered. Look at the opportunities that we have. Here I am, as I said, the child of an immigrant, the grandchild of immigrants, and most of the people that I know are likewise that way. And who are they? They're doctors, they're educators, my own sister was a movie star. My father was a very famous musician. There is cause for hope, great cause for hope, and I am hopeful.
Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing Deadpan to life with the humor, with intrigue, and with hope. I believe that laughter is an healing balm that we need, especially in this time.
Yes.
So
yes.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to having you back again. We could go
I'd
on
love
and
to come
on.
back. I'm ready whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you. And for those of you who are listening, please, if you have a burning desire to write a book, but you just don't know where to start, join me in my class on Sundays or on Wednesdays. Just go to my Instagram, author Denise Nicholson, and click the link and you can get into the class. Okay? Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a central hub and a safe space for authors to share their stories. Follow Dr. Denise on Facebook and Instagram at Denise Nicholson, or go to denisenicholson.com. Remember, no one can share your story better than you.